Hi everyone, it's Miss Terry, and I'm here to talk today about my October picks for students in grades 7 through 8. We'll talk about some fiction, then we'll talk about some graphic novels, and then I have some nonfiction books to share with you today. This first book is called Glimpsed, and it's the story of a fairy godmother, actually named Charity, who has a tendency to see glimpses of what her high school classmates' deepest, darkest wishes are, and she's convinced that these glimpses can help her give them their happily ever afters. And she ends up seeing one of her classmates, her name is Vindaya, crowned as homecoming queen. So she's very excited and she gets right into action to help her achieve that goal. Unfortunately, the night of homecoming, it actually turns out to be a disaster, and Vindaya ends up going home in tears after a public humiliation. And Charity actually gets caught by cute, nerdy boy Noah, who kind of accuses her of meddling in people's lives and blames her for the breakup between him and his girlfriend Holly, and demands that she help him get back together with Holly or he's going to tell the world what she is. And now Charity finds herself in a pretty impossible situation trying to fix the mistakes that she has made, and that's called Glimpsed. The Girl Who Wasn't There is about a girl named Kaja. She's 15 years old and she's very sick. She has what's called chronic fatigue syndrome. She's very tired and very sick a lot of the times, and she spends a lot of her days looking out her window as she's trying to get better. She has to stay home from school quite a bit because of her illness. And one day she witnesses what she's pretty sure is a kidnapping happening across the street, and she ends up calling the police. And when the police arrive, they ask, like what happened, and she's trying to tell them what's going on. And she says, look, I wasn't the only witness. There was another girl in the window across the street who was watching the whole thing. Unfortunately, when the police go across the street to find out what is happening, there is no other girl living there. It's just a husband and wife and their baby daughter. Kaja is convinced that she saw what she saw and that there is a mystery afoot, and she tries to use herself and her friends to see if she can figure out what is going on. So that's called The Girl Who Wasn't There. Hiding, while isn't it necessarily in the horror genre, is definitely on the creepy side, and it's about a boy, 16-year-old Danny, who is heartbroken after his girlfriend Laura breaks up with him. And one day after her family leaves the house, he slips in through a window to just kind of come to terms with their breakup. Well, he ends up getting stuck in the house overnight when the maid pops up quickly, and he ends up having to hide, and he ends up staying there for several days while this family comes in and out of their homes. And it's just kind of a creepy story of a boy who's very good at hiding, and we're not really 100% sure what his motives are for being in that house. It's called Hiding. Into the Hurricane is about two teens, Maxine and Eli, who have both come to a lighthouse on an island off the coast of Louisiana, and they have come for different reasons. Maxine actually has just recently lost her father, and she's come to scatter his ashes, and Eli actually is considering suicide from the same lighthouse that his sister had committed suicide from a year before, and he's just really struggling with the grief and the loss of his sister. Unfortunately, Hurricane Celeste is just about to break ground. It's a Category 5 hurricane, and the two find themselves stranded on this island as the only bridge off gets shut down, and they find that they have to work together to get to higher ground against some pretty difficult odds. Involves an ATV, an alligator, kind of a creepy family that might want to hold them hostage as the two of them are coming to terms with what they are dealing with in the force of a hurricane. Thanks a Lot Universe is the story of two boys, Brian and Ezra, and Brian's life is pretty much falling apart. His dad has done something illegal at work, and he ends up leaving the family pretty much on the run from the police, and his mom actually attempts suicide as a result. And so Brian and his younger brother are thrown into foster care, and they're moved to a new home, a new family, and therefore a new school. And Brian is really struggling with his anxieties and his worries about what is happening in his life. And then he meets Ezra, who's a popular basketball player and who really just kind of connects with this shy, quiet boy, Brian. Even though the other kids at school aren't necessarily nice to him, Ezra really thinks he's a great kid, and the two of them start to connect, and Ezra actually even has growing feelings for Brian. And this is a story about two boys who are really just coming into their own and realizing what true friendship is. This one is called Temple Alley Summer, and this is a story about a boy named Kazu who one night is watching a spooky ghost story on TV, which he knows he shouldn't do because he has a very active imagination, and he actually sees this very pale girl coming out of a room in his house. And the next day at school, she's there, and her name is Akari, and he's never seen her before, yet everyone at school is convinced that she's been there all along and that she and Kazu have been best friends forever. So Kazu knows that something strange is happening, and it turns out that he lives on a street called Kimyo Temple Alley, which really stands for things that come back to life. And he realizes that there's something very different about Akari, and he's going to try to solve that mystery. If you like anime and manga titles, you will enjoy this. It's not written in that style. It's actually just a story, but it has that kind of Japanese theme to it. The Secret Life of Kitty Granger is a wonderful historical spy novel, and it's the story about Kitty, who is actually on the autism spectrum. She's able to detect a secret door in a minute. She can solve almost any puzzle she sees instantly. She's really good at recognizing patterns, and one day she actually follows a man who's acting strangely off the bus and falls into a group of Russian agents. Luckily, she's able to get away, but it doesn't stop her from being recruited by Her Majesty's Spy Corps, and Kitty is thrown right into training as she's trying to save London from the bad guys. So if you like spy movies, if you like James Bond type things, you'll definitely enjoy Kitty Granger. This next one is definitely in the horror genre. This one is called Rules for Vanishing. And this is about a girl named Sarah whose sister has gone missing. And everybody kind of just assumes she's run off with her boyfriend, but Sarah knows that she wouldn't do that. And she's not the first girl to go missing. In 1953, a young girl named Lucy Callow had disappeared one night when she went into the woods. And on the anniversary of her disappearance, the wood reveals the road that she supposedly went down to where she disappeared, and Sarah is convinced that that's where Becca is as well. And the story is told all from the aftermath of what happened. There's very strict rules about traveling the road, and this is definitely a spine-tingling shiver of a ghost story. This is called Rules for Vanishing. The City of Villains is kind of a modern take on the Disney villains. If you liked the movie Descendants, you probably will like this a little bit more grown-up version. And this is a story about 15-year-old Mary Elizabeth, who actually is struggling after the death of her family. And she ends up witnessing something called the Fall, in which a 160-story building simply vanishes in their town with over 3,000 people on it. And this has really torn a rift in their city between those who think magic should go away and those who think magic should come back. And right now there is another villain on the loose, the evil Mad Hatter, who is leaving some grisly presents for the police department. And Mary Elizabeth, who is an apprentice at the police office, is drawn into the mystery of what is going on. And as you can kind of see, there's some of the favorite Disney evil villains in the story. It's kind of fun because Mary Elizabeth's best friend is Ursula, and she also has a boyfriend whom she adores. His name is James, but he runs around with the Neverland gang. So all of your favorite Disney characters will make an appearance, just maybe not in the way that you think they will. And then the last fiction one I'm going to talk about today is called All These Monsters. And this is a story about a girl named Clara who decides to get away from her failing grades and her rather abusive father to join a billionaire CEO's son's group that he's starting, which is a monster slaying squad, because their world is constantly being attacked by what they call scrabs, which are monsters with armor-like skin and sharp claws that basically devour any humans in their path. So Clara decides to go try out for this squad. She kind of falls for the very cute and handsome leader of the squad. His name is Julian, but it's not too long before we discover that Julian is not very different than her father, and she kind of needs to get away from him. This is action-packed monster action, as every time they even start to get into training, the Scrabs attacked and they're on the run for their lives. So this is the first in the series, and the second one, which is called All These Warriors, has just come out. So that's All These Monsters. All right, let's look at some of the graphic novels. This first one is a manga style, which means it's written backwards to front in the Japanese manga style. This one is called Cutie and the Beast, and it's the story of a girl named Kuga who is really, this is about a girl named Momoka who, you know, most of her friends kind of are all into the pretty boys, but she actually prefers this pro wrestler whose name is Kuga. And even though he's often the villain in the ring, he's quite a softie at heart, and the two of them form a bond. So it's called Cutie and the Beast. This is the first in the series. This next one is a graphic novel adaptation of a book called The Crossover by Kwame Alexander, and it's about two twin brothers who are stars on the basketball court, but are actually having some struggles at home, including a father who's pushing them quite a bit, but he's also having some health issues, and the two of them are trying to work out their differences. And this is again written in a verse, because one of the brothers is really a poet at heart, as well as being a basketball star. So it's called The Crossover. Quinn Credible is the beginning of a new series. I have number 2 already out. And Quinn lives in New Orleans right after Katrina. So they're still kind of reeling from that hurricane when the event happens, which is a meteor shower that gives a lot of the town's inhabitants special powers. And Quinn is not super impressed with his superpower. It's basically invincibility. So he goes from being kind of the small kid who gets beat up to the small kid who it doesn't really hurt him when he gets beat up. And he's not really sure how his power is going to help him until things get bad in the city, and he's recruited by Glow, who's another superhuman with a unique power. So again, this is the first in the series. It's called Quinn Credible. This next one is called The Spy Who Raised Me, and this is about a young girl named Josie Black, or JB, and it turns out that she can infiltrate any building, speak over a dozen languages, and is a master at martial arts. Unfortunately, she doesn't know any of this. She's starting to realize she has some gaps in her memories, and it turns out that her mom works for a secret organization that bred her to be this super spy. Well, JB is not happy about this, and she runs away from home, and this is her trying to figure out what she's going to do with these skills that she's been given almost against her will. It's called The Spy Who Raised Me. This next one is a little bit on the scary side. It's called Scarlet Heart Monster Hunter, and she is the orphan of 2 really well-known and good monster hunters. And even though she has a lot of the skills that her parents have passed down to her, everyone thinks she's too young in order to become a monster hunter. But unfortunately, monsters are on the rise, and they're going to need her skills if they are going to be able to survive, if humans in general are going to be able to survive. The Witch Boy is the story of 13-year-old Asher, who lives in a world where girls become witches and boys become shapeshifters, and that's it. If you try to go against the grain, you are exiled and you don't get to be a part of their community anymore. Well, Asher is really drawn to being a witch, and as he gets older, he still hasn't shapeshifted. And then when something attacks all the boys in his village, he realizes that he can save them, but he's going to have to use witchcraft in order to do it. So it's called The Witch Boy. And then the last graphic novel I'm going to talk about, this one is called The Dark Matter of Mona Starr. And Mona is a young teen who suffers from depression, and she actually calls it her dark matter. And this is the story of how it affects her and how she learned to deal with it through art and through other therapies. So it's called The Dark Matter of Mona Starr. All right, let's look at some of the nonfiction. This first is a young reader's adaptation. It's called The Warrior's Heart, and it's a story of a man named Eric who is a humanitarian traveling all over the world, helping others until he became a Navy SEAL, and then he helped others in a different way. This talks about his journey and what it was like to go through training in the Navy SEALs and how difficult it was. I mean, they'd often start their groups with well over 200 soldiers trying to become a Navy SEAL, and it would winnow down to only like 12 because that's how difficult the training is. And there's pictures in here, and there's some really great stories of how he became the man who he was. This next one is called Free Lunch by Rex Ogle, and this is a story about Rex. And he is a young man, kind of, his family is in trouble. They don't have a lot of money. His mom and her boyfriend are actually out of work at the time of the story. They are in danger of losing their house, and his mom signs him up for the free lunch program at school. Unfortunately, he goes to a rather wealthy school, so he's one of very, very few students who have to be on the free lunch program. And when he goes to the cafeteria, he has to explain to the cashier that he's on the free lunch program, and she's kind of hard of hearing, so he always has to like yell it out as loud as possible. And then when his family is kicked out of their home, he ends up having to live in the government housing that's close to the school. So he always kind of waits till everyone else is gone, so nobody knows where he lives. And it's really the story of what it's like to be growing up poor in America, and kind of the way people treat you sometimes, which is not always very good. So this is a true story. This next one is a historical book called Missing, Mysterious Cases of People Gone Missing Through the Centuries. And you can see on the front, it is Amelia Earhart, one of the greatest mysteries of all time. What happened to her? Did she make it around the world? Is she living secretly somewhere else? But this looks at 6 or 7 different people that have gone missing and what people think might have happened to them. This next one is a new one. It's called The Power of Style, and it's how fashion and beauty are being used to reclaim cultures. So this is kind of an own voices story about how using fashion allows people that have normally been kind of marginalized and not treated well to kind of reclaim their power. And it looks at a whole bunch of different types of styles, including ribbon work of the indigenous people, hair braiding. It also looks at cosplay, as well as drag queens and other fashion icons like that. This next one is actually a graphic novel, but it's a historical fiction. It's called In the Shadow of the Fallen Towers, and it's the seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years after the 9/11 attacks. We just recently had an anniversary for them on September 11th, and this book looks at what happened during the event and what's been happening afterwards. Again, it's written in graphic novel format. Oops, that's not good. Let me flip a couple more pages. Okay. And this one is called Surprising Spies, and it's Unexpected Heroes of World War II, and it looks at the people who did everything in their power to try to destroy the Nazis, including a Major League Baseball player, a magician, a safecracker, and it talks about the missions that they went on and how they gathered secrets for the Allies against the Nazis. And then the last book I'm going to talk about today is yet another graphic novel. This one is a biography of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who recently passed away. And you know, one of the things that she always said is that real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. And this actually looks at her life step by step to show how she became the amazing woman that she was. Okay. Hope you would find something to read.